There are two different deadlift types. You have conventional deadlift, you have sumo deadlift. We'll discuss both of those in a second. But how do we warm it up? Well, deadlift, it's similar to a squat, right? It's a heavy lower body movement, but a lot of back involved. We want to keep a nice rigid, straight torso, and we're lifting weight from the ground to a standing position. The muscles that are major in this are your glutes, your quads, your hamstrings, and then your low back. So how do we warm those up? Well, we could do some of the stuff we did for the squat. We could do some of that banded walk. We could do our squat down and make sure we got good mobility so that we're in a good start position and we can get the right angles at our joints. But one that I really like to get activation in glutes and low back, which is what we're really going to see pressure-wise in the deadlift, is our banded glute bridge. Okay, so let's demonstrate this one. I'm going to lift up a band. We've got it on our pegs here. I'm going to put this band right over the hips. Position in there. You good? Heels are going to come towards the backside. So we're going to come a little bit closer, get full positioning on the floor. Nice flat foot. Arms are nice and stable and wide. Head is supported by the floor. We're then going to lift up and squeeze our glutes to the ceiling. Okay, activation here, low back extension, glutes extending at the hip. This is what's going to happen when we stand up. We're into this position. Come back down. Good, so you can do multiple reps here, and you can see that activation and get the blood flow and get warmed up. What we can do even more so though, to make sure that we get equal contribution from right and left hip, and so that when we pull, it's symmetrical, is that we can lift up and then we can take away a leg and see if you can stay stable. So lifting up, extend one leg out, and does anything happen to the hips? Does one side drop? Okay, if one side's dropping, the low back isn't stabilizing. Come down, push up, extend away. So now, Jackie's doing great by not getting too red. This is a lot of effort, okay? You should try this, okay? Both legs up, we're really strong. Two legs make it easy. Can we stay there? Isometric contraction, and lift one leg away. Go ahead, extend one out. No movement. We don't want any movement in the hip. Come down. Is it equally good on the other side? Extend out the other leg. You see that the hips want to dip. You want to minimize that as much as possible, getting that activation. Go ahead, come down. Woo! Low back and glutes firing. He probably hates me right now. So that's another way we can get really engaged in the lower body, glutes, and low back. Okay, let's set up for conventional. Let's talk about conventional first. So again, start lightweight. Okay, you can. We never just do the bar because the bar would sit on the floor, and that gets us into a really low position. It's very hard to get good form and have flexibility to be able to do that. So just a light load to start. You know, that's again relative. If that's 10 pounds for you, if that's 25, if that's 45, where we're starting. We're in a conventional position, so that means we're in our jump stance. That's where we're strongest. Conventional deadlift, if you want to jump, that's where you want to be in your conventional deadlift. Okay, that's where we're strong. You see people that deadlift out here. Okay, it can be a sumo deadlift, and we're about to talk about that in a second, but that's not a conventional deadlift, so arms should be wider here. Unless your legs are so big that you can't go any closer. Okay, and that's when you're talking like you're 300 pounds, 400 pounds. Okay, so that's not the case today. So we're about short, so we're about hip width apart. Toes should be pointing forwards. If anything, there's a tiny little bit of external rotation, so the toes are a little bit wider than your heels, but not much. It's pretty straight. We want to start with the bar directly over the center of gravity, right? So we want it directly over the center of the foot. So where's that in relation to the shin? It's about 1 inch in front of the shin. Okay, so it's right there. And then we want to talk about activation, engagement of all these muscles that are happening to get this right. The weights are over the center of the foot. We want our shin bone, so our tibia here, to be vertical. Okay, when a lot of people squat down, they're going to want to do this. The problem when they do this is my knees are now in the way of my path. So we actually have to push the hips back, push the glutes back, get a stretch in the glutes, which is why it becomes such a dominant glute exercise. A stretch happens, a contraction has to happen. So that's why it's dominant in the backside. This one really works glutes. So then, okay, how do we get everything here to be nice and strong and stable so that we don't have flexion in the spine and get this shear force breaking each of these vertebrae? Okay, in order to do that, we have to pull down our shoulder blades, just like I talked about in the squat, in the bench. Okay, you have that external extension in the thoracic spine, depression in the scapula. So what we want to think about is pulling our armpits into our hips, pull them down. Okay, when you pull down in those shoulder blades, we're using those lats. Remember that lat's the big muscle here to here. We're pulling down and we're creating this nice tension in the torso. Okay, this extension. That way we've got nice tight torso. It's not going to flex on it. Okay, if we lift and we have any relaxation of that and we have any flexion, you're going to hurt your back. Okay, you can have a slightly rounded back. Especially if you're really muscular, it's going to look slightly rounded because of the amount of muscle, it bulges here and it won't bulge as much here. So it's going to look slightly rounded. But as long as the spine is straight and it doesn't move through the range of motion, all the movement happens right here in a deadlift. Shouldn't happen anywhere along here. Okay, go ahead, stand up so you can relax again. I know you're just leaning over it. So, we're in the right position at our feet. Bar's about an inch away from our shin, center of the gravity in the center of our foot. Remember that tripod, just like the squat, heel, little toe, big toe, pushing down. We're going to then come down, we're going to depress the scapula, we're going to pull down on our lats, okay, and then we're going to extend at the shoulder, okay. Again, this is another activation of the lat muscle that runs from here up to the inside of my humerus. If it contracts, it pulls my arm this way. Okay, sometimes you do this as an accessory exercise when you do straight arm pull down. Okay, this is an activation of the lats. That's what we want here. Okay, we want the weight, it's in front of us. It's in front of our center of gravity. We want it on our center of gravity. So we've got to pull this way to get us to maintain over the center of our foot the whole time. It constantly wants to be further away. We've got to pull it in. Okay, what I like to show people on this. 35 pounds. I can lift this here. Lift it over there. Okay, the further it goes from my center of gravity, the heavier it gets. Okay, so we want it really tight to our center of gravity. So we're gonna extend at the shoulder. We're gonna try to keep it tight. Pull those lats down. We're gonna then descend. Go ahead and squat as far as you can. Try to maintain vertical shins. Come down if you can. Bring that all the way to your shins. Bring that bar in. Bring the bar in. Then stand. Good. Good. Excellent. So the back stays nice and straight. Ride the thigh, ride the shin. It should be touching you the whole time. Go ahead, come down nice and slowly. Touching the shin the whole time. That means it's staying close to our center of gravity. Come on up. Pull it in. Good. No bending at the elbow. We're not picking up the weight. Okay, we're standing up with it. If we try to curl this or move or bend at the elbow, you're probably going to tear a tendon. Okay, we've had that happen many times when you deadlift. That tendon tears and it will ball up. Your bicep will ball up. Okay, you can't lift even at this weight. What we got 50? We got 90 pounds. It's very hard to curl and pick up. Our legs can do it really easily. Our arms cannot. They're not as strong. Go ahead and come down. Ride that thigh. Ride the shin, and you can see it nice and straight. All right. Questions on conventional deadlift? We'll go to sumo, so go wider. Now this is common because depending on your hip width and your shoulder width, okay? Generally males tend to see that a conventional deadlift is absolutely fine because our shoulders are wider than our hips. And you can see my arms when they swing, they're not impeded at all. We want to lift up as heavy weight as possible when we're talking about lifting as heavy weight as possible. We want to do it for the shortest distance because it's really heavy. We don't want to do more work than we have to. If I want to lift this to my standing position, my arm is longest vertically straight down. If I lift them out a little bit, my arm comes up slightly. Hopefully you can see that. It's only a small amount, but if I lift higher and higher and higher, my arm is shorter vertically. Same thing happens if I do it this way. So my longest arm is directly dead straight down from my shoulder joint. So that's where I want to be when I do a conventional deadlift. That's where I want to be when I do a sumo deadlift. If I have really big hips though, I can't create that happening, but if I had a really big hip, I couldn't do that because my hips are in the way of my arm. So that's why people try to sometimes do the sumo deadlift. It gets your hips out of the way, and you can still have vertically dead straight arms if you shoulders. Generally we see females in that regard. Okay, so when we do a sumo deadlift, external rotation happening, we want the toes to point out this time. We don't want them dead straight because they're not going to be impeded when we descend. In the conventional deadlift, when we descend and actually go to grab the bar, our shins come forward slightly, and that's why we start about an inch away, because as we squat down, our shins come forward a little bit and it goes into point of touching the shin, and we can ride the leg all the way up. When we do the sumo, well, because we've externally rotated and we're nice and wide, when we descend, our legs go wide. They don't go forward. Okay, so we can start this bar touching us the whole time. We don't have to be an inch away at the start position. So it can be right on those shins, and that's the start position. It doesn't have to be a little bit away. Otherwise, the cues are going to be exactly the same in the torso, in keeping you rigid. Okay, you're going to depress the scapula, you're going to pull back, you have a nice straight back, you're going to have lots of tension. Arms are dead straight, you're going to grab that bar and push the world away. Go ahead and stand up. Okay, the cue that I would say is different here, instead of just push the world away on a conventional deadlift, your legs are wide here. I would say push the world apart. Try to literally separate the earth from beneath you. If you had a crack in the earth, we're here and we want to push either side further and further away, activating our glutes, which is where we're more dominant when we're in an abducted position. These are contracted already. So let's really make the most of it and push away. In both, we want to make sure, again, torso is erect, nice and strong. We want to think crown of the head, as tall as possible. So crown of the head to the ceiling. When you go down, trying to keep your head as high as possible. Be tall. And then even when you're lifting, maintain it. Keep it as high as possible. Go ahead, show them a few more reps. Push the world away, keeping everything tight. And that's your form on the sumo deadlift. Great job. So that's how we warm it up. That's how we make sure our glutes, with the band, we did those glute bridges. We make sure the glutes are active. We make sure that the low back is active. And then otherwise, all the technique that I mentioned are pretty consistent on both conventional and the sumo, just the width apart, and then the activation, kind of what you're thinking about as you contract and activate those muscles. Questions on deadlift?